There comes a moment in every person's life when they feel something they cannot explain. A strange pressure inside their chest. A quiet whisper in their mind saying you are meant for more than this. Yet every time they try harder to succeed, something gets in the way. The world feels heavy. Opportunities slip through their fingers. And sometimes in the middle of the night when all the noise fades, they wonder a question that feels almost frightening. What if the thing stopping me is me? This is the moment when transformation truly begins. Part 1. Evan Parker sat alone in his car outside the office tower where he had just finished a job interview. The sun was bright. The city was buzzing. Yet his chest felt tight with disappointment. He replayed the interview again and again. Every word he said. Every smile that felt too eager. Every answer that came out sounding rehearsed instead of natural. He whispered to himself, why do I always do this? Evan wanted success so much that every time he tried to impress someone, he ended up creating the very result he feared. He had done the same thing at a friend's birthday party the week before. He tried too hard to be likable. He laughed too loudly at jokes. He told stories that fell flat. He walked home feeling as if the world saw right through him. It was the same with his business idea. He had pitched it to a potential client with such excitement that he overwhelmed her. She thanked him politely and never replied again. Sitting in the car now, Evan realized a painful truth. His effort was not the problem. His talent was not the problem. His dreams were not the problem. The problem was something smaller, an invisible something inside him that pushed too much, tried too hard, and got in the way exactly when he needed flow. He rested his head against the steering wheel. Then he noticed an old notebook lying in the passenger seat. The cover was worn. Inside it were half-finished ideas and scattered notes from motivational books. One page caught his eye. 3 words he had written months earlier but never understood. Step aside, self. He stared at the words. For some reason they hit him differently now. It felt like a key sliding into a lock. He said softly, maybe the self I am trying to fix is the thing blocking me. That night he went for a walk through the quiet streets of his neighborhood. The sky was purple and fading into night. His thoughts were loud. Too loud. He kept remembering every moment in his life when pressure made him crumble. Every time he tried to shine, he somehow dimmed himself. Every time he wanted to stand tall, he felt smaller. Halfway down the sidewalk, he stopped under a streetlight and whispered, what if there is another way? As if an answer, a memory rose in his mind from a book he had once read. A line about great achievers. They succeed not because they push harder, but because they learn to step out of their own way. They learn the power of what the author called conscious disappearance. Not disappearance from the world, but disappearance from their old patterns, their old fears, their old version of themselves. Evan felt something stir inside him. He said quietly, maybe transformation does not start with force. Maybe it starts with letting go. He returned home and opened his notebook again. This time he wrote a question at the top of a blank page. If I stopped being the old me, who would I become? The question felt enormous. Powerful. Almost dangerous. But it felt right. As he sat there thinking, he remembered something else the same book had said. Whatever version of yourself you hold constantly in your mind is the person you must become. It is natural law. It is unbreakable. It is the foundation of all change. Evan closed his eyes. He tried to imagine a new version of himself. Not perfect. Not loud. Not desperate to impress anyone. But calm. Confident. Someone who walked into a room with quiet clarity. Someone who spoke because he had something real to say, not because he wanted approval. Someone who succeeded not by forcing himself forward, but by removing what held him back. At first the image felt blurry. Then slowly it sharpened. Evan saw a man who was strong on the inside. A man who trusted himself. A man who did not chase validation but lived by principle. A man who disappeared from doubt and appeared in confidence. He opened his eyes. The picture stayed with him. Evan realized something important. If his mind could create this picture, then his mind could also help him become it. The Creator had given him control over only one thing in life. His thoughts. Not the weather. Not other people. Not outcomes. Only his thoughts. And that was enough. More than enough. He said out loud, I can control what happens in here. He tapped his temple. And that changes everything out there. For the first time he felt a spark of hope that did not fade after a few minutes. Something new was forming inside him. A decision. A clear decision. He picked up his pen again. He wrote the answer to the question he had asked himself earlier. He described the person he wanted to become in simple, clear detail. He wrote until the picture felt real. Until it felt alive. Until it felt possible. Then he wrote a final sentence. I choose to disappear from who I have been. When he wrote those words, he felt something shift. Not a loud moment. Not a dramatic moment. Just a quiet change in direction. A new beginning. A fresh path. Evan knew this transformation would not happen overnight. He understood now that real change begins in the invisible world long before it appears in the visible one. He knew there would be days when doubt returned and days when progress felt invisible. But he also knew something deeper. If he held the picture of his new self in his mind long enough, and clearly enough, his mind would begin to build that reality around him. The law was certain. The process was certain. The transformation was certain. He had taken the first step. He had started the journey. And he whispered with quiet conviction, I am ready to disappear from the limits that held me back. The night felt different now. Calm. Peaceful. Filled with new possibility. Evan closed the notebook and smiled. Part 1 of his new life had begun. If you want, I can write Part 2 in the same powerful Napoleon Hill style. Part 2, the invisible beginning. Engaging hook. There comes a moment in every transformation when the world sees nothing changing, but inside, everything is shifting. This is the moment that decides who rises and who returns to their old life. Most people quit here. But a few, a very rare few, discover the power of invisible growth. This was the moment Alex stepped into without even knowing it. Part 2. Alex woke up the next morning with a mix of excitement and uncertainty. The decision he made the night before still echoed in his mind. He had chosen to step away from the version of himself that had kept him small. But he quickly discovered something important. Change does not announce itself with trumpets. It begins quietly. It begins invisibly. It begins inside. He sat on the edge of his bed and felt both ready and afraid. His old self whispered that nothing would change. His new self whispered that everything would. He noticed that both voices were fighting for control of his mind. This was the first lesson he had to learn. Transformation begins in silence long before the world notices anything. Alex remembered the old man from Part 1 who had told him about disappearing from his limitations. That conversation still stayed with him. The old man had looked into his eyes and said something Alex would never forget. He said that the invisible part of change is the most important part. Now Alex was beginning to realize what that meant. He went into the kitchen and poured himself a cup of coffee. As he took the first sip, he felt the old doubts rising again. What if he failed? What if he was not strong enough? What if he had imagined the possibility of transformation? He stopped himself right there. He decided that if his mind tried to feed him old doubts, he would replace them with new thoughts. He took a deep breath and said quietly, Today I think like the person I am becoming. Not the person I have been. This simple sentence felt like a shift inside his heart. It was small, but it was real. Alex grabbed a notebook and wrote down a picture of his new self. He described how he wanted to think, how he wanted to speak, how he wanted to act, and how he wanted to live. He tried to see it clearly in his imagination. This was the beginning of his invisible self. He realized something powerful. If he kept holding on to memories of failure, he would never grow beyond the person he used to be. So he practiced something new. He practiced conscious forgetting. Each time an old memory tried to pull him back, he whispered, That is not me anymore. That was the person I used to be. I am not that person now. At first it felt strange. It felt almost wrong to release the past. But the more he practiced, the lighter he felt. It was as if he had been carrying a heavy box on his back for years and suddenly decided to put it down. Something inside him began to open. Something began to breathe. Later that afternoon, Alex took a walk through the park. He noticed the trees swaying gently in the wind. Each leaf moved with ease, without resistance, without fear. He wondered what it would feel like to move through life with that same ease. Then he realized that this was exactly what transformation was about. It was about letting the wind of change move through him instead of fighting it. He sat on a bench and reflected on his journey so far. He understood now that he had entered the invisible period that every great transformation must pass through. He also understood that most people quit when they cannot see progress. They want instant results. They want validation. They want visible proof. But nature does not work that way. A seed breaks open underground long before it breaks through the soil. A butterfly forms wings inside the cocoon long before it flies. And a person becomes new in the mind long before the world sees the change. Alex reminded himself that the invisible work mattered. The invisible discipline mattered. The invisible choices mattered. So he told himself something that strengthened his spirit. I trust the process. Even when I cannot see it, I trust the process. As he walked back home, he felt a quiet courage growing inside him. He had never felt this kind of courage before. It was not loud and dramatic. It was gentle and steady. It was invisible courage. That night he practiced something else he had learned. Invisible persistence. When no one was watching and no one would ever know, he chose to stay committed to his new self. He read 10 pages of a book that inspired him. He spent 10 minutes visualizing the person he wanted to become. He spent 5 minutes replacing his doubts with new thoughts. These actions seemed small, but they formed the foundation of the new identity he was building. When he went to sleep, he felt something different. He could not describe it yet, but he knew something important. He was changing. Not in a dramatic way. Not in a way others could see. But in a way that felt stronger than anything he had ever experienced. Something new was growing inside him, and he knew he had to protect it. The next morning, he woke with a sense of purpose. His old self tried again to pull him back into old thoughts, but this time he responded differently. He said quietly, I choose the new me, not the old me. Each time he made this choice, he felt his new identity strengthen. He felt a shift in his mindset. He felt a quiet confidence forming. This was invisible preparation. He was preparing himself in private for the person he would soon become in public. Alex understood now that transformation is not a moment. It is a series of choices. It is a daily decision. It is invisible at first, but unstoppable once it begins. And though the world could not yet see it, something remarkable was already happening. Inside him, the new self was awakening. If you want, I can continue with part 3 in the same style. Part 3: The house where no one was watching. Engaging hook. People often pray for transformation in public, but their future is being shaped in the quiet moments where no one is watching. The true question is this: what do you do when the world is silent and you are alone with your thoughts? That answer decides the life you build. Part 3: Invisible preparation, invisible discipline, invisible faith. Ethan woke before the sun again. The sky was still dark, and the world felt silent and cold. Most people hated mornings like this, but Ethan had started to love them. In these early hours he felt something powerful growing inside him. Not a loud power. Not a dramatic power. A quiet, invisible power. He used to believe that real change happened in big moments. A new job offer. A chance meeting. A sudden burst of motivation. But over the last few weeks, he had learned something different. Something the old Ethan had never understood. Change begins long before anyone sees it. Change begins in private. Ethan smiled as he sat on the edge of his bed. His mentor, Mr. Grant, had told him something that stayed in his mind. He said that every dream has 2 births. The first one happens inside the mind. The second one happens in the world. Most people try to skip the first birth and rush to the second. That is why they stay stuck. Ethan remembered how he used to complain about his job, his relationships, and his results. But back then he had never changed the way he thought or reacted or visualized himself. He tried to fix the outside while the inside stayed the same. Now he understood why nothing worked. That morning he lit a small candle on his desk. It was his daily ritual. A reminder that light begins small. A reminder that transformation begins quietly. He closed his eyes and asked himself a question that had become his new daily guide. What would the person I want to become do right now? This question had changed everything for him. Because the moment he asked it, he could no longer behave like the old Ethan. He had to think and act like the man he wanted to become. As he sat in silence, he began his invisible preparation. He pictured himself as confident, calm, and capable. He imagined himself solving problems with patience instead of panic. He imagined responding to difficult people with respect instead of frustration. He felt the emotions of the new Ethan. Strength, gratitude, stability, clear purpose. Grant had told him that athletes practice in private so they can perform in public. That principle applied to everyone. Ethan had started practicing being his future self in the safety of his own imagination so he could be that person in real situations. The more he rehearsed his new identity, the more natural it became. After a few minutes of mental rehearsal, Ethan opened his eyes. He felt stronger, clearer, more grounded. He knew this invisible preparation was shaping his visible life. But preparation was only the first part of the lesson. The second part was discipline. Invisible discipline. Ethan used to rely on motivation from others. A friend cheering him on. A video that made him feel fired up. But now he realized something important. External motivation fades quickly. Internal discipline lasts. Invisible discipline was what he was building now. It showed up in every small choice. Waking up early instead of sleeping in. Thinking positive thoughts instead of negative ones. Ending his day with gratitude instead of complaints. Choosing growth over comfort. These decisions were small, but they were powerful. Each time he made the right choice, he felt himself becoming stronger. More focused. More in control of his life. One morning Ethan was tired. He had stayed up late the night before. His alarm rang and he felt the old urge to roll over and sleep. The old Ethan would have done exactly that. But now something inside him spoke. The person you are becoming is built in this moment. He sat up. Not because he felt motivated, but because he felt committed. This was invisible discipline. Doing the right thing even when it was difficult. Even when no one was watching. Even when comfort was calling. He walked to the window and looked outside. The world was still quiet. He placed his hand on the cold glass and whispered, almost to himself, that he was done living with old habits and old limits. He wanted a life that matched his potential, not his excuses. But there was still a third lesson he needed to learn. Invisible faith. This was the hardest one. Ethan wanted proof that his efforts were working. He wanted to feel different right away. He wanted others to notice his change immediately. But life does not work like that. Transformation is like planting seeds. You cannot dig up the soil every day to check if the seed is growing. Growth happens in silence. Growth happens in patience. Growth happens in the gap between effort and evidence. Many days Ethan felt no visible progress. His mind still slipped into old patterns. His emotions still tried to pull him back. Some days he asked himself if all this invisible work even mattered. Grant saw this frustration in him and invited him for tea. As they sat in the quiet room, the older man placed a small seed on the table. "This," Mr. Grant said softly, "already contains a tree. You just cannot see it yet. Faith is the ability to act like the tree already exists even while you are looking at a seed." Ethan stared at the tiny seed. Something shifted inside him. He realized he had been expecting his transformation to shout. But real transformation whispers first. Invisible faith meant trusting the process even when he could not see results. It meant believing in the new Ethan even when the old Ethan still appeared. It meant continuing the work, the preparation, the discipline. Not because he already had proof, but because he trusted the path. He left Mr. Grant's house that day with a new clarity. The invisible work mattered. The quiet work mattered. The moments no one could see mattered. Because that is where the foundation of a new life is built. Day by day his invisible habits became visible confidence. His invisible discipline became visible strength. His invisible preparation became visible transformation. And one morning Ethan realized something powerful. He was becoming the man he used to only imagine. That is the secret many never learn. Transformation is created in silence long before it is celebrated in public. Part 4: The Silent Turning Point. **** Engaging hook. Every person reaches a moment when life quietly asks a deep question. Do you want to rise higher or stay the same? Most people never hear this question because it comes without noise. It comes in ordinary moments. But the ones who listen change their entire future. Part 4: Becoming the person your future needs. ***. Ethan felt something changing inside him. It was not loud or dramatic. It was soft but steady. Like a small river cutting its way through stone. Every day he woke early, practiced his invisible preparation, strengthened his invisible discipline, and nurtured his invisible faith. Yet he still felt there was another step he had not learned. One evening, after a long day at work, Ethan walked to the Old Town Library. Mr. Grant had once told him that true transformation never happens in places of noise. It happens in places of stillness. Ethan felt drawn to go there. The library was almost empty. Only one lamp lit the reading area. He sat at the large wooden table and opened a blank notebook. For a moment he just stared at the empty page. It reminded him of something important. Every day was just like that blank page. What he wrote on it was his choice. He closed his eyes for a moment and asked himself the question he had been avoiding. What must I let go of to become the person I want to be? His heart felt heavy. He knew this was the next stage of his growth. It was time to face the habits, thoughts, and fears that were still pulling him backward. He remembered something Mr. Grant had said during one of their talks. The universe cannot fill a closed hand. You must let go of what no longer serves you before you can receive what you need. At that moment, Ethan realized a powerful truth. Transformation is not only about what you add. It is also about what you release. He picked up the pen and wrote 3 simple lines. Old beliefs, old habits, old fears. He looked at the list and felt a mixture of fear and determination. These 3 things had controlled his life for years. They had shaped his reactions, his choices, and his opportunities. It was time to confront them. His first challenge was his old beliefs. For years he believed that great things were meant for others but not for him. He believed he was average. He believed he could not succeed without someone else pushing him. These beliefs had followed him since childhood. But now he saw them clearly. They were not truths. They were stories he had accepted. Ethan closed his eyes and pictured the new version of himself again. Strong, calm, focused, capable. That person did not carry the weight of these old beliefs. That person believed in possibility. That person believed in growth. That person believed that he deserved success because he worked for it. He opened his eyes and whispered, almost with a tremble in his voice, I release these beliefs. They do not belong to my new life. A quiet strength filled his chest. Not loud. Not dramatic. But real. His second challenge was old habits. Ethan had always been someone who reacted emotionally when stressed. He used to rush decisions. He avoided difficult conversations. He procrastinated on important new steps. These habits were comfortable but destructive. They kept him trapped in patterns he hated. He remembered that habits do not disappear on their own. They must be replaced. He began listing new habits that the new Ethan would practice. Calm breathing before responding to problems. Facing issues instead of avoiding them. Taking small daily actions toward his goals. Keeping promises to himself. He wrote these new habits slowly, giving each one purpose. By writing them, he felt himself adopting them. He felt a future version of himself becoming clearer. The third challenge was old fears. This was the hardest part. Ethan had always feared failure. He feared embarrassment. He feared disappointing people. But the fear that hurt him the most was the fear of becoming someone others did not recognize. He feared that if he changed too much, he would lose the relationships he cared about. He sat quietly with this fear. Then he remembered something powerful Mr. Grant had once told him. The people meant for your life will grow with you. The people not meant for your life will fall away quietly. Do not shrink to stay connected to someone you have already outgrown. This thought freed him. As he breathed deeply, he felt something release inside him. A weight he had carried for too long. He whispered softly, I am ready to grow without fear. As Ethan sat in the quiet library, something shifted. His mind felt clearer. His heart felt stronger. He understood that letting go is part of rising. The person he wanted to become required space. Space that had been filled with old patterns. He left the library with a new energy. A sense of direction. A quiet confidence that he was moving towards something bigger. The next day brought the real test. At work, a difficult situation arose. In the past he would have reacted quickly and emotionally. But today he paused. He breathed. He practiced his new identity. He responded with clarity instead of frustration. His coworkers noticed something different in him. He did not explain it. He did not need to. His transformation had begun showing itself. Later that week, he faced another moment of temptation. He felt tired and wanted to skip his morning routine. The old Ethan would have given in. But the new Ethan asked himself the question that guided his transformation. What would the person I want to become do right now? The answer was clear. He got up. He showed up. He kept his promise to himself. The next Sunday, he visited Mr. Grant to share his progress. The older man listened quietly with a gentle smile. When Ethan finished, Mr. Grant picked up a small stone from his desk and placed it in Ethan's hand. The stone was smooth and round. This, Mr. Grant said, was shaped by water that flowed over it day after day. Not through force. Through consistency. That is what you are becoming. Someone shaped by small daily actions repeated with discipline and faith. Ethan held the stone and felt a sense of pride. For the first time in his life, he understood something important. Real change is not loud. Real change does not announce itself. Real change is built in silence, strengthened in discipline, and powered by faith. As he walked home from Mr. Grant's house, evening sunlight warmed his shoulders. He felt himself stepping into a new chapter of his life. A chapter he was creating with intention. A chapter he was writing each day through his thoughts, choices, and actions. He whispered to himself, I am becoming the person my future needs. And he knew it was true. Part 5: The bridge between who you are and who you are becoming. **** Engaging hook. Every person carries two versions within them. The one they are today and the one they were born to become. Most people never meet their higher self because they refuse to cross the bridge between comfort and growth. Today Ethan reaches that bridge. Part 5: The day Ethan faced his turning point. ***. The morning felt different. Ethan woke before his alarm, and instead of the usual quiet stillness, he sensed a strange new energy in the room. As if life itself was preparing to teach him a bigger lesson. He sat at the edge of the bed, feet touching the cold floor, and breathed slowly. Something inside him whispered that this day would test everything he had learned. He poured himself a warm cup of tea and went to his balcony. The sunrise painted the sky in soft colors. For a moment Ethan simply watched it. This had become his daily practice. A way to begin the day with peace instead of panic. But today his mind would not sit still. He felt a new challenge approaching. As he stood there, he replayed the last few weeks in his mind. Invisible preparation had changed his thinking. Invisible discipline had changed his choices. Invisible faith had changed his confidence. Releasing old beliefs, old habits, and old fears had opened space inside him. He felt stronger, clearer, more focused. Yet he sensed there was still a deeper step ahead. A step that would push him beyond everything familiar. Later that morning at work, the test arrived. His manager called everyone into the conference room. Ethan felt his heartbeat quicken. The manager announced that a new leadership position had opened. The company needed someone calm, responsible, and consistent. Someone who could guide a small team and bring stability to the department. For a moment, the room froze in silence. Ethan felt a pull inside him. It was the voice of the new self he had been practicing. The voice that believed in growth and possibility. But right behind it came the voice of the old self. The one filled with doubt. You are not ready. You have never led anyone. You might fail. People will judge you. Two voices. Two versions of himself. Two possible futures. Ethan looked around the room. A few coworkers seemed excited. Some whispered to each other. Others looked uninterested. Ethan felt the battle inside him deepen. He wanted to step forward. He wanted to grow. But fear tried to hold him still. The manager ended the meeting by saying that anyone interested should speak with him privately. Ethan walked back to his desk with a storm of thoughts in his mind. That is when he suddenly remembered something Mr. Grant had once told him. There will come a moment when your future knocks on your door. If you wait for perfect confidence, you will never open it. You must step forward first. Confidence comes after you walk, not before. Ethan repeated those words like a quiet prayer. After an hour of thinking, Ethan stood up. His legs trembled slightly, but he walked toward the manager's office anyway. He knocked. The manager looked up with a warm smile. Ethan took a breath. I want to be considered for the new role. The words came out softer than he expected, but they were clear. The manager studied him for a moment. I am glad you asked, he said. I have been watching your growth these past weeks. You are more focused, more stable, More responsible. I believe you are ready. Ethan felt a wave of emotion. He had spent weeks preparing in silence, and now his private work was becoming visible. But the story did not end there. That afternoon, the manager gave him his first leadership task. A small assignment, but an important one. Ethan needed to guide a team of 3 coworkers through a challenging project. It required patience, clarity, and courage. As he walked into the meeting room, old fears tried to return. But he stopped and reminded himself of something important. Leadership is not about perfection. Leadership is about growth. Leadership begins with faith in the new self. Ethan greeted the team with calmness. He listened carefully. He asked for ideas instead of giving orders. He encouraged them when they hesitated. He guided them with compassion instead of pressure. The team responded positively. For the first time in his life, Ethan felt himself standing inside a bigger version of himself. A version he had only imagined before. When the meeting ended, he stayed behind alone. He sat in a quiet chair and smiled. He felt proud, but not in an arrogant way. He felt the pride that comes from honoring one's own potential. That evening, Ethan visited Mr. Grant. The old man opened the door with a curious smile. I saw something different in your eyes today, he said. Ethan told him everything. The announcement. The fear. The doubt. The decision. The assignment. The success. Mr. Grant listened quietly, then poured 2 cups of tea. He placed 1 cup in front of Ethan and sat down. This, he said as he tapped the table gently, is the 5th stage of transformation. The stage where your inner growth meets the outer world. The stage where your new identity is no longer a practice. It becomes action. You stepped into your future today. Ethan nodded slowly. He felt the truth in those words. Mr. Grant continued. Most people think opportunity creates leadership. But it is the opposite. Leadership creates opportunity. You did the invisible work. You prepared your mind. You disciplined your habits. You strengthened your faith. Now the world is responding to who you are becoming. Ethan felt a deep warmth in his heart. He understood now that transformation is a partnership between effort and opportunity. The universe gives chances, but only to those who are ready. Mr. Grant leaned forward and spoke softly. But remember this. Growth does not stop here. Every new level of life asks for a new level of you. Now that you have stepped into this role, you must continue your invisible preparation. You must continue building discipline. You must continue believing in yourself. The person you are becoming requires constant nourishment. Ethan nodded again. He felt both excited and humbled. He realized that each step forward brought new responsibilities. But he also knew something else. He was ready. On his walk home, the night breeze felt fresh against his face. The city lights flickered like stars on the ground. Ethan felt different. Not because of the new opportunity. Not because of the praise. But because he had crossed the bridge between who he was and who he wanted to be. He whispered to himself as he walked. I am ready for the next level. And for the first time in his life, he truly believed it. Part 6. The birth of the unshakable self. **** Engaging hook. There comes a moment in every person's journey when the world tests whether their transformation is real or temporary. A moment when life asks only one question. Have you truly changed, or are you pretending to change? Today Ethan faces that moment. Part 6. The final test of transformation. The next morning Ethan woke with a calm energy. Something inside him felt complete, as if all the invisible work of the last months had finally settled into place. He no longer felt like he was trying to become someone new. He felt like he already was that person. He walked to the kitchen, made his tea, and stood by the window. The sunrise was brighter than usual. It painted the sky with a soft gold that made the world look peaceful. Ethan felt grateful. He had walked a long road. He had fought old fears, old habits, old self-doubt. He had built new patterns, new beliefs, new strength. He had crossed from his old identity to his new identity. What he did not know was that life had prepared one final test to seal his transformation. Later that day at work, everything seemed normal until the manager called him into the office. Ethan walked in with confidence. He assumed it was about the project he had led. But the manager's face looked serious. Ethan, he said, I want you to know that the company is going through some changes. There will be pressure. There will be challenges. We need someone who can stay calm, guide others, and think clearly even when things get difficult." Ethan nodded. "I understand." The manager continued. "I am offering you the leadership position officially. But I want to see how you handle a real challenge first." Ethan felt his heart beat faster, but he kept his posture steady. "There is a conflict in the team," the manager explained. "Two people are arguing. It is affecting the project. I want you to resolve it. This will show me whether you are truly ready." Ethan walked out of the office slowly. Not because he was afraid, but because he understood the weight of what was being asked. This was not about a project. This was about identity. This was about proving to himself that he was no longer the man who avoided responsibility. He was now the man who led with clarity and confidence. He entered the meeting room. Two coworkers sat on opposite sides of the table, both frustrated. Ethan took a seat between them. He breathed in quietly, centering himself. For a moment he felt the old Ethan stirring inside him. The old Ethan who hated conflict. The old Ethan who froze in uncomfortable situations. But then something powerful happened. A quiet voice inside him whispered, "You have prepared for this. You are no longer that old version. Act like the person you have been practicing to become." He looked at both coworkers calmly. "Tell me what the issue is," he said gently. Within minutes, Ethan understood the problem. Miscommunication. Assumptions. Pride. Fear. All things he had once battled within himself. He listened carefully, calmly, with the patience of a leader. He repeated their concerns clearly so they both felt heard. Then he guided them step by step to a solution, not by force, not by authority, but by clarity, understanding, and emotional intelligence. The meeting ended smoothly. The tension dissolved. Both coworkers shook hands. Ethan walked out of the room feeling lighter. Something inside him had shifted forever. He realized that he had just acted naturally as the new self he had been building in the invisible realm for months. This was no longer practice. This was who he was now. That evening he visited Mr. Grant. The old man opened the door with a look of quiet pride. "You handled the test," he said without Ethan saying a word. Ethan laughed softly. "How did you know a test was coming?" Mr. Grant smiled. "Because life always gives a test before it gives a promotion. It is the law of growth." They sat in the small living room. Ethan told him everything. The offer. The conflict. The resolution. The confidence he felt. Grant listened with the same calm wisdom he always had. When Ethan finished, the old man leaned forward. "This is the final stage of transformation," he said. "You are no longer trying to become someone new. You have become that person. Your invisible work has created a visible reality." Ethan nodded slowly. He felt emotional. Not because of the success, but because of the journey. The challenges. The growth. The invisible battles. The inner victories. They all brought him here. Grant continued. "Now hear this truth. Your transformation is permanent only if you continue practicing the principles that built it. The world will keep growing. You must keep growing too. But you have now proven that you can rise higher than your fear. You have proven that you can lead yourself before leading others. You have proven that you can act from your new identity even under pressure." Ethan took a breath and let those words sink in. They felt like a final seal on his journey. Before he left, Mr. Grant held his shoulder. "Your life is about to expand in ways you cannot imagine. But always remember where it all began. It began with a single decision. A decision to become the master of your own mind." That night as Ethan walked home, the city lights shimmered on the quiet streets. He felt strong. He felt grounded. He felt whole. He understood now that real transformation is not about changing who you are. It is about uncovering the greatness that had always been inside you. When he reached home, he looked in the mirror. Not with doubt. Not with criticism. But with gratitude. He whispered to his reflection, "I am the creator of my future." And for the first time in his life, he knew it was true. His old self was gone. His new self was born. His future had opened. The journey was complete. If this story inspired you to rise above fear and become your best self, then make sure you subscribe, share, and leave a comment. Your support helps this message reach more people who need strength, hope, and transformation.